As the coronavirus continues to spread massively in Sweden, more Somalis are dying of the virus more than any other group. According to a new report by the Public Health Agency of Sweden published on April 17, people in Sweden with foreign backgrounds are disproportionately affected by the virus. In Nigeria, while security forces have killed over a dozen people in the southern part of the country for violating social distancing and locked down others, it seems to be business as usual for those living in the north.
Is the cure worse than the disease? In Nigeria, security services have killed 18 people in the country in a bid to enforce coronavirus restrictions.
So stay with me and watch to the end as we look into these important topics this week. I'm Sonny Christopher AIMUAMWOSA, and you are welcome back to your favorite channel, Prime Reporters TV. Having started as a local public health issue in China, the coronavirus pandemic has now morphed into a global economic and political threat. And as the pandemic continues to sweep the planet, it has put the limelight on manners with which affected nations are trying to face the challenge, revealing the true natures of various governments. As most governments around the world continue to impose strict social distancing measures to try to stop the spread of the virus, Sweden has obdurately stuck to its lax approach, the so-called the Swedish model, and refused to go into lockdown or impose strict restriction or social distancing policies. But according to James Hadley Chase, there is always a price tag. And guess who are paying the ultimate price for this so-called Swedish model? People with foreign backgrounds, the Somalis, Iraqis, Syrians, Finnish, Turkish, Iranians, former Yugoslavians, and the Eritreans. Now, during the early stage of the pandemic, the Swedish government and most commentators proudly embraced this so-called Swedish model, claiming it was built on Swedes' uniquely high levels of trust in institutions and in one another.
I think it's good, and it's been good.
I feel safe.
Now, the government expects citizens to, as a tradition, freely follow its advice, but failed to consider that Sweden is facing a demographic change, especially after the refugee wave in 2015. A lot of people have come to Sweden in these past years that are not Swedes yet. Meanwhile, the Swedish national broadcaster SVT reported in late March that Somali Swedes are criticizing authorities for not doing enough to support the community during this pandemic. And this came after it was reported that 6 of the 15 people who had, at the time of that report, died from the virus in the country come from Stockholm's Somali community. And in response to this death, authorities then say they would be distributing information about the coronavirus in 15 different languages, including Somali and Arabic. And despite large awareness creating campaigns in hindsight among foreign-born communities in the Swedish capital's vulnerable suburbs, the spread of the virus in these communities underlines long-existing issues around segregation in Sweden. Now, Sweden's Civil Contingencies Agency, that is responsible for public safety and emergency management, has also acknowledged that there were delays in translating information about the virus to other languages. In other words, while the government and authorities were asking citizens to be Swedes, sufficient information was not mother's milk to people with foreign background. In another word, people with foreign background didn't get sufficient information. A Somali Swede local doctor told reporters that the virus may have spread during Friday prayers at a local mosque at the time when up to 500 people were still allowed to gather in the same place, and blamed authorities for not spreading information about how the disease is transmitted earlier. Jihan Mohammed, a board member of the Swedish Somali Medical Association, told SVT, she said, and I quote, "When coronavirus spread to Sweden, there was not so much information in Somali, and people continued living as usual," end quote. One of the good things with this Swedish model is that we are asked to stay at home or self-quarantine if we feel or if we notice any symptom like illness, like cold, cough, fever, etc. People are asking, do they fail to put asymptomatic transmissions into cognizance? That is, people may be infected with the virus without showing symptoms. It's as if they weren't aware that infected individuals are most contagious before they start showing symptoms. So people may be sick, people may have already contracted this disease and still go to work. People may have already contracted the virus and still go to school. But we are told to stay at home when you feel sick. So people are asking, why is it that the government is not putting this into consideration? Instead, they are asking people, stay at home if you are sick. Another risk group who are paying dearly are the senior citizens. In early April, Swedish media reported that a third of all elderly care homes in Stockholm had recorded cases of COVID-19. On April 16th, the Public Health Agency said a third of all COVID-19 related deaths in Sweden, there were at that time 1,333 confirmed fatalities, had occurred at care homes. And here's the most interesting part. A large proportion of the workforce at those homes is made up of immigrants. 28% are foreign-born. And in Stockholm, it's 55%. And this is information according to the National Board of Health and Welfare. But Anders Tegnell, an epidemiologist at Sweden's Public Health Agency, thinks drawing a link here would be purely speculative. Here's a rundown of how Sweden has seen and handled the pandemic so far. In practice, the core task of managing the outbreak fell from the beginning on a single man, the state epidemiologist Anders Tegnell, at the National Institutes of Public Health. Tegnell approached the crisis with his own set of strong convictions about the virus, believing that it would not spread from China, and later that it would be enough to trace individual cases coming from abroad. Tegnell argued there were no signs of community transmission in Sweden, and therefore no need for more general mitigation measures. Despite Italy's experience, Swedish ski resorts remained open for vacation and partying Stockholmers. Now, Swedish authorities only gradually became aware of the possibility that asymptomatic transmission is possible and that infected people can also spread the virus before they start showing symptoms. And fear arising now is that a blind spot is masking the spread of the coronavirus in some communities in Sweden. However, Sweden's neighbors have long taken a more aggressive approach during the COVID-19 outbreak. Denmark and Norway, for example, quickly closed their borders along with schools and industries to maximize social distancing. These charts show that those two countries have done better than Sweden in keeping the number of cases down. Now, there are some kind of divided opinions in the country as the fatality continues to rise. While some remain staunch supporters and believers of Tegnell and his strategy, others think he has given the people some kind of fake hope and security and that he needs to humble himself and have a rethink before he leads the country into more catastrophe. But that's not all. Reports are showing that coronavirus-related deaths in Sweden are being underreported. An article on a national newspaper Expressen on April 23 reads, "Political stupidity is causing the elderly to die of coronavirus unnecessarily." All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. This phrase seems to be an ultimate example of the systematic abuse of power in language. When Nollywood actress Funke Akindele Bello and her husband were arrested for organizing a birthday party in their home after the lockdown and social distancing order was implemented, it was a violation of an executive order. But when one of the most powerful men in the presidency died and government officials flouted NCDC social distancing guidelines during his burial, it was lapses in protocol or unintentional violation. Funke Akindele Bello and her husband were arrested in Lagos for organizing a party in their home during the lockdown in Lagos State. The party, which was a celebration of her husband's birthday, was recorded and posted on different social media platforms. Nigerians picked holes with this and called for her immediate arrest and prosecution. There was an outcry that she acted above the law. Even the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC, disassociated itself from her. It denied the engagement of any brand ambassador as part of its social awareness for the fight against the coronavirus. The court sentenced the couple to 14-day community service, and they were fined 100,000 naira each after they pleaded guilty to a one-count charge of violation of social distancing order preferred against them by Lagos State government.
And will be isolated for 14 days in a place to be determined by the Lagos State Ministry of Health. This comes 2 days after the couple organized a party in violation of the restriction order and social gathering in the state.
When you take a look at this video, you will notice that the people here are more than 20, and this is at the court premises, and they are not social distancing. So now how can a court sentence or convict someone for not social distancing when the court itself hasn't put anything in place to maintain social distancing? During the burial rites of Abba Kyari, the late Chief of Staff to President Muhammadu Buhari, family members and friends were allowed to gather and bury him at Kudu Cemetery in Abuja. It's important to note that Mr. Abba Kyari died of coronavirus on April 17 in Lagos. His body was then flown to Abuja, where he was finally laid to rest. Large gatherings of more than 20 people had been banned in Abuja to enforce social distancing to curb the spread of the virus. But this ban was flagrantly flouted during Kyari's burial when some politicians decided to organize a prayer session, thereby breaching the presidential order and the NCDC guidelines on social distancing. Videos and pictures from the funeral showed tens of people in attendance during the janaza prayer and actual burial without observance of social distancing. And this provoked a public outcry as Nigerians took to social media to call for the arrest of those present at the funeral. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has admitted making some mistakes. The task force said it will continue to follow the guidelines and protocol of the NCDC in the burial of COVID-19 patients. But a lot of Nigerians are still irate. Most of them are wondering if Nigeria is one country with different laws or if the same rules applies differently to different people due to proximity to power. One of the most common questions I have been asked these past few days from my viewers, especially from Nigeria, is the issue of what happens to bodies of people who are killed by coronavirus. Most of them want to know if the government releases these bodies to family members for burial or if the government keeps them. This question became imperative after the burial of the late Chief of Staff to the Nigerian president, who also died of coronavirus. Because prior to that, Nigerians were made to believe, to understand by the Minister of Information and Culture, Mr. Lai Mohammed, that such corpses are properties of the federal government. This he disclosed in a forum in Abuja on Thursday, April 2nd. But the NCDC has confirmed that bodies can be released to family members for burial as long as the NCDC guidelines are maintained. Now, the question in the mouth of almost every Nigerian is, are we in the same country? Or does the same rule apply to people differently depending on who you are or where you live? Now, the same offense that Funke Akindele Bello and her husband committed, that they were sentenced to a 14-day community trial with a fine of 100,000 naira each, is the same offense committed by these so-called politicians in Abuja, and all they got or all they could do was to come out and admit that they unintentionally violated the social distancing regulations and that it was a lapse in protocol. Now, that brings us back to the question, are some people more important or are some people more equal than the others? Please let me know what you think. You think this is right? Let me know what you think. You think this is wrong? Let me know what you think. And please, let's have a constructive argument. So that's it again for this week. Thanks very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and share so it can get to as many viewers as possible. Here we try to keep it objective so we don't bring forward our own opinions. So we try to balance information with facts. So please, if you know you have anything you want to talk about or if there is any information you want to fact check, do not hesitate. Just reach out. Many people have been reaching out to me through messages, messengers, and mail, and I have done a lot of fact checking for them. So please don't hesitate to just reach out so we can talk about what you have in mind so you get the accurate information. And please do not also forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos. What we do here is try to give the accurate information as much as we can, and we want a lot of people to also get access, to have access to this kind of videos. Please, it doesn't cost anything. Share and subscribe, and we will be glad you did. Thank you very much, and see you next week.